Welcome to Crimson Clues, where shadows hide secrets and silence reveals the truth. Every story is a puzzle, and every clue takes you closer to the answer. Subscribe now, join the hunt, and let the mystery begin. This chapter is about the girl with the violets. Poirot agreed to leave his beloved heater and accompany me to a little photographic show in Bloomsbury during that strangely unsettling week between Christmas and New Year's, when London pretends to be on vacation while looking shabby as ever. I feel good about myself because he gave in to my moderate pressure. In truth, he had recently been restless, and there is nothing more tonic for him than a room full of faces, fixed on paper or not, on which he may perform his calm sport of deduction. The photographer was Terence Darnell, who was well known for his photographs of theatre actresses, soft lighting, gauze, and a whiff of scandal that remained just that. His rooms were packed with young guys in thin ties and ladies wearing their hats at a dangerous tilt. In one corner, a gramophone played a foxtrot. Darnell, a pallid monster with a pencil-thin mustache, approached us like a waiter. "Mr. Poirot." "I thought it must be," he said, flashing a white advertisement. "So your head is unmistakable," Tien muttered to Poirot, fixing his own luxurious mustache. "From the front, sure. From the back, sadly. I'm just like every other man." It was then that I noticed the girl. She was scrutinizing the images with such focus that her small, lovely mouth remained silent. Her hair was dark, blacker than fashion, and the pallor of her skin stood out like jet on milk. She was dressed in a poor velvet dress that had been combed repeatedly, and a posy of violets was pinned to her coat, like a badge. "Isn't she pretty?" Darnell caught my eye. "Violet Silverlake. Isn't the name a stroke? She came to me for a test the other day. Don't they all go to the cinema? Still, there is something about her." His tone, I felt, was equal parts calculating and compunction. A little tragic, perhaps. Audiences prefer the tragic. Poe had drifted to the girl, who stared up at him with the bashful bravado of the very young, and those who must be brave to eat. "You admire the photographs, mademoiselle?" asked the man. "They're dreams caught in glass," she added abruptly. "If you can see your face among them, perhaps the dream will turn and respond." She blushed. "That's rubbish. Excuse me. On the contrary, Poirot stated that many dreams are courteous. They respond when one knocks very quietly." Her smile revealed little, even teeth. "He'll knock until my knuckles bleed, Mr. Poirot," he said. "And this is my friend, Captain Hastings." We talked for a few minutes. She had recently returned from the seaside. Hastings, that is, forgets which small village. She had a room in Bayswater, and was seeking for the kind of work that starts with teacups in hand and finishes, if luck is with you, with your name on a program. She talked without anger, but we knew that so far luck had been a cruel little footman who glanced the other way. When we finally parted, she caressed her violets. "For fortune," she explained. "They were my mother's favorite flower. Do you believe in emblems, Mr. Poirot?" "I believe," Poirot said with a smile, "in the things that men and women tell themselves in order to walk bravely." We ventured out into the raw afternoon. "A sweet child," I replied. Poirot, too, described himself as determined. "She is hungry." "Hastings, you do not understand what I mean by the stomach. Observe the mild dullness of the eye and the tremble in the fingers. It is possible that Mademoiselle Violette does not eat breakfast or lunch on a regular basis." I proposed rashly that we turn back, find her, and insist on a late tea. Poirot shook his head. He explained that the English are quite careful about their prides. Furthermore, it's possible that she's already engaged to Hope. We returned to our comfortable little rooms in Whitehaven Mansions, and if Violet Silverlake lingered in my thoughts for longer than necessary, I blame my nature, which is perhaps soft on stage. The next morning we took a walk in the park. Poirot took a malicious pleasure in feeding only the sparrows he had judged to have the neatest habits. And then, as we approached the gate, I bought an evening paper for the football, which is a vice of mine. The headline struck me like a fist. "Young actress found dead in West London. Body discovered in vacant lot. Mystery surrounds." Gruesome post scene. I read on, appalled. A constable on the Bayswater beat, following up a report from a charwoman, had discovered the body of a young woman lying in a derelict plot off a mews. The manner in which it had been arranged, spare me the details which the paper did not spare, suggested a mind both cold and theatrical. A name was not yet given. Poe, reading over my shoulder, took the paper with unusual abruptness. He read it once and then again the second time, with an attention that travelled line by line like a steel nib across paper. "You think no, it cannot be." I said, "Not Violet Silver Lake." She wore violets." "Violets," said Poirot softly, "and the notice says there were flowers scattered about her. Garden violets, even though the season is wrong." He folded the paper with that finality, which with him means a decision taken. We go to Bayswater. Inspector of Scotland Yard was already at the scene and greeted us with his usual mixture of relief and exasperation. "Trust you to turn up when the devil mixes a particularly nasty pudding," he said. "If you won't mind, Mr. Poirot, this one's bad." "I shall mind," said Poirot, "very much, but I shall see," he saw. I will not, out of respect for the dead and for the stomachs of my readers, attempt more than to say that the poor girl had been robbed of dignity in a way that suggested a sort of practiced cruelty. There were violets scattered as though from a florist's packet. Near her hand lay a scrap of ribbon. From her coat, a cheap velvet, a small safety pin had been torn out. There were no papers in her purse, and whatever name had told the world who she was had been carefully removed. "Came over with a notebook. We land identifying her. Says she's called Violet." Violet Silverlake came up from the coast. Odd business with telephone calls. Anonymous late at night. Someone asking for the girl with the violets. And there's this. He held up a small waxy smudge wrapped in tissue. Makeup, white face paint of some sort found dabbed along the wrists. "Heaven knows why!" Pooh stared at the smudge as though it were a signature. "Ah," he said, "already the murderer writes to me. Hastings, my friend, this is not merely murder. It is posing. It is the composition of a scene. And that," said grimly, "is why I sent for you the moment I saw that mess. Your murderer, Mr. Poirot, is either an artist or thinks he is." Poirot looked at the poor scattered violets. His face, always so carefully composed, altered for an instant with a great weariness. "Nom," he said, "he is not an artist. He is a little boy in a dark room playing with dolls, frightening himself with his own shadow." He straightened his tie. "We shall find him." And in that moment I believed it. Yet I could not help thinking of the girl who had said she would knock until her knuckles bled, and of London, which sometimes answers when one knocks, and sometimes opens upon a staircase that ends in a pit. Chapter 2, The Photographer and the Shadow. Japp's investigations, which no man is more competent to conduct, moved briskly. Violet Lakes' landlady, Mrs. Grimble of Innes Terrace, furnished us with a small box of possessions, a hairbrush more honest than elegant, a postcard from a seaside friend signed L, a crumpled theatre ticket, and the little posy of violets now crushed, which had been pinned to her coat. There was also, in a penny envelope, a print from Darnell's studio, the test portrait soft as breath in which Violet's eyes looked at one like promises unkempt. Darnell says she sat for him a week ago. Told us he's a fish I don't fancy. No charge there, Mr. Poirot, only a constable's instinct. We've also got a Dr. Adrian Vine private rooms in Bayswater, who saw Miss Lake once to do with a skin blemish. He says genteel sort of sawbone silver type handshake like a fish and a smile like a razor. And there's a theatrical agent, Mrs. Selina Broom, who tells me she warned the girl off certain gentleman friends who pay for suppers and expect a breakfast. It's the usual crowd. I'd like to sweep them all into the river and see which one floats. Poirot regarded him with affection. And the telephone calls? Mrs. Grimble's testimony was clear. On 3 successive nights, a woman's voice, low, well-be-bred, had asked for the girl with the violets. The voice had rung off if anyone else answered. On the 4th night, no call. On the 5th, after the murder, a call had asked with a kind of trembling excitement, "Has she gone out? Is she wearing them?" Mrs. Grimble had said, "Who is this?" And the caller had hung up. "A woman," I cried, astonished. But surely, said Poirot. "Women also live in the world, mon ami. They have the jealousies, the fears, the cruelties, all the repertoire." He turned the portrait over in his hands. "We must go see M. Darnell, also Dr. Vine." "What is the small detail that entices?" "The makeup on the wrists. It's not sensible. Therefore it is important. We began in Darnell's studio. The man greeted us with constricted hospitality, as if his apartments, like his smiles, had been organized with a ruler. "I am devastated," he said. "She knew the camera trick. That is extremely rare." "You took only one portrait?" Poirot inquired. "A dozen plates," Darnell stated, "but the others were, how shall I say, uncertain. She hadn't learnt to remain still. This one had something, an accident possibly. She gazed beyond the lens. "That is good. And the violets?" questioned Poirot, pointing to a small vase on the dressing table filled with drooping posies. "There are too many for this season." Darnell spoke casually. "I use them occasionally. Color suggestion, even in monochrome. I buy them from a florist on Queensway. Miss Lake liked them. They wore them way the girls used to wear violets to the play. Old-fashioned." Poirot ran a finger along the dressing table's edge, holding it up. "Plaster dust is as fine as talc Darnell tinted. We had some carpentry work done on the shelving." Poirot confirmed this. "And did you know a woman who called Violet Lake and asked for the girl with the violets?" Darnell blinked. "No, why should I?" Poirot agreed and wanted to see the dark chamber. It smelled of hypocrisy and ambition. Darnell described a headless mannequin on a shelf as being used to evaluate lighting. Poirot spotted a coil of soft wire in a drawer, similar to those used by modistes and sculptors for armature-urses. Darnell stated that he sometimes constructed his own reflectors. I spotted slight cuts on his fingertips, as if they had been caused by an untrustworthy blade. "An occupational hazard," Darnell explained, tucking his hands behind him. "When you work late, you become careless," Poirot said, nodding his head. "And you worked late the night of Mademoiselle Silverlake's sitting." "Not late," Darnell said too fast. "Perhaps until 8. On the same evening, a young vocalist came in for publicity plates. The tired girl couldn't keep her chin at the same height twice." "Her name?" he inquired, using that sudden tone that causes men to admit to things they had not before considered. Darnell fumbled for a moment. "Cynthia Marks. She performs in the chorus at the Alhambra. Or was. She may have been let go by now." Pooh thanked him, and we moved back onto the street. The day had turned bitter, the kind of cold that comes not from the weather but from stone and soot, and the city's subconscious inability to care. "So I answered well," said Poirot, the good. "Monsieur Darnell doesn't like blood. He welcomes suggestions. He likes composing. He prefers to keep his tragedies in a frame, lighted by a lamp. He is, as you say in English, a little. How is the term precious, don't you think? I believe Poirot stated that we have seen a man who wishes to appear capable of evil things. But wishing is not acting. There is vanity involved. Yes, but not with the economy of gesture. The murderer of Mademoiselle Silverlake wastes nothing, including cruelty." We returned to Whitehaven Mansions shortly to warm ourselves, and Poirot served us chocolate instead of tea. He is constantly prone to chocolate in circumstances that irritate him. "Do you notice, Hastings," he remarked, blowing carefully on his cup, "that everyone talks about Mademoiselle Silverlake as if she were a type? The tragic girl, the pretty struggler, the Anenu who hopes none speak of her as a person." "Well," I said slowly, because she was extremely young, and being very young typically means being symbolic. Poirot's eyes gleamed precisely so. Everyone wanted to exploit her. The photographer to establish his creativity, the theatrical agent to prove her practicality, the person who called to possibly to display her power, and someone else to prove something more darker. A knock on the door. "It was correct," he said without greeting. "We've completed our course. The landlady is as direct as they come. Dr. Adrian Vine confirms seeing Miss Silverlake once, saying she was anxious and asked strange questions. They didn't mention what. Mrs. Selina Broom, the theatrical agent, will see us right now if you're willing to continue." Poirot rose at once. "Fatigue always exercises the little grey cells." I mumbled, "Oh, good. Cold pavements get me moving." Chapter 3. The Woman Who Managed Dreams. We started out again, the winter afternoon already settling into the murky half-light that London takes as morning clothing. A harsh wind blasted down the streets, making me wish I had insisted on my heavier coat. Poirot, by comparison, seemed immune to suffering, albeit, as he notes, he is not immune to ugliness, and London in December can be both chilly and nasty. "Mrs. Selina Broom," Poirot said quietly as we proceeded. "She is a woman who has dealt with ambition for many years. Such women understand human nature better than philosophers, and they are particularly aware of the cost of hope." We arrived at Piccadilly and turned down a narrow street surrounded by tall buildings. Mrs. Broom's office was located above a tobacconist, as previously stated. The stairway was steep, the wood worn to smoothness by years of climbing feet. At the landing, Faded playbills announced roles that were once spoken confidently and with applause. They flapped slightly in the breeze, resembling antique flags from vanquished armies. Poirot knocked, and after a moment the door opened to reveal a woman dressed in an uncertain purple satin blouse and a strand of pearls whose brightness had faded over time. Her hair was groomed with professional effort. Her lipstick was consistent but overly bright, and her eyes were sharp, shrewd, and achingly exhausted. "Yes," she answered. "You're here about Violet. Not Miss Silverlake. Not the girl. Simply Violet." Poirot bowed with respect, never condescending. "We appreciate that you will see us, madame." She led us indoors. The office was small, messy, but not disorganized. Each stack of papers, I sensed, was exactly where she wanted them to be. On one wall were images of chorus girls smiling with exhausted success, actresses signing autographs with sweeping hands, and one or two more aristocratic faces dressed in bygone season costumes. The room smelled strongly of powder and tobacco. "Sit." Mrs. Broom smiled grimly as she answered, "If you find a clear chair." Poirot remained standing. I discovered a spot on a settee that creaked with protest. Mrs. Broom lit a cigarette from a silver case and held it without actually smoking it. "She was a good girl," she explained. "That is the worst kind to lose." "You knew her well?" Poirot asked. Mrs. Broom let out a little laugh. "As well as one knows any girl who believes she is preparing to be discovered. She came to me 3 months ago. A clean coat, polished shoes, and a letter of recommendation from a girl I once cast in a summer theatre in Cornwall." Violet spoke quietly, as if asking one to lean closer to hear, gentle and determined. "The two do not commonly come together." "And did you find her work?" I asked. "I tried." Mrs. Broom shrugged. "She had some appeal, but attractiveness without money rarely raises a female alone. I did, however, send her to a recital tour reading. I believe the director liked her. She was not chosen. She departed that day with her shoulders rigid, as if she were carrying something heavy and unwilling to drop it. Her tone seemed almost maternal. I doubt she'd have thanked me for recognizing it." "And the violets?" Poirot asked. Mrs. Broom's gaze dropped just for a moment. "She told me that her mother used to raise them. Violet thought they were lucky. I let her have it, despite the fact that it was somewhat silly. We all need symbols. Mine used to be open overnight. They lasted even less than flowers." Poe looked at her intently. "You warned her about certain dangers, I think." Mrs. Broom laughed sharply and brittlely. "I warned them all. London isn't nasty at first. It smiles at them, offers tea and a seat near the stage. Then when the girl is mesmerized, it devours her alive. I advised Violet to be wary of invites that appear generous, of people who offer advice too enthusiastically, and of men who appreciate the shape of hope rather than the soul behind it." "And she listened?" I inquired. "Yes." Mrs. Broom stubbed out one cigarette and began another. "She listened." "That does not imply she obeyed. Was she terrified, madam?" Mrs. Broom's expression changed. Some lines, some repressed grief shifted. "No," she replied. "Not afraid, resolved, that's worse. A scared girl can be guided away from danger. A resolved one is already entering it." Poe dropped his head slightly in acknowledgement of the fact. "And the phone calls?" he inquired gently. Mrs. Broom stiffened. "So the landlady told you?" "Yes," Violet said. "A woman's calm, refined voice asks for the girl with the violets. Not her name, not her room. The girl with the violets." "What did Violet think of it?" I inquired. "That it was a chance," Mrs. Broom said quietly. "A door that might open, and she was so sick of knocking on doors." We were silent for a moment. Poor was curious. "Do you have reason to know the identity of the caller?" Mrs. Broom took a deep drag on her cigarette and exhaled softly. "I can't say I know," she muttered, "but I've heard that tone before. It belongs to women who don't audition, who summon and who sit in the third row to judge who is worth their time." "A patron," I said. "Oh, a collector." Mrs. Broom's mouth drained of soul's devotion and obedience. "I've seen them destroy more lives than any man with a wandering hand." Poirot looked serious. "Did Violet mention meeting the caller?" "No." Mrs. Broom's voice softened as she hoped she would. "Oh, how tragic that the woman admired her. She assumed it was admiration." "And you?" Poirot asked gently. "What were your thoughts?" Mrs. Broom gave him a direct look. Her eyes, despite their tiredness, were sharp. I thought the woman wanted to possess her, she told me, and possession is simply another form of destruction. The hush that ensued was as long and frigid as the evening outdoors. Poirot bowed. You cared for her? Mrs. Broom said, closing her eyes. Not enough, she muttered. Not enough to keep her away. We thanked her and left. Outside, the streetlights had turned on, staining the pavement in feeble halos. A bus roared past, and a newsboy yelled headlines about the murder with casual indifference, as if tragedy were no more than a loaf of bread. We stood for a bit, watching steam rise from a bakery vent. Joined us there, having maintained a discreet distance throughout our interview. Well, he inquired, stamping his fists against the chill. Poirot stated that she is not our culprit. Mrs. Broom, I wanted to inquire, but Poirot spoke before I could. She saw the dangers, but she did not direct them. She observed Violet's vulnerability to influence, but she did not use it. Grunted, so there's still a voice in the dark. A woman has asked for the girl with the violets, but we don't know who she is or what she wants. Poirot nodded. Ah, but we know something now. This woman did not want Violet's affection. She desired her cooperation. The violets weren't sentimental. They were a signal, indicating that here is someone who can be guided. Where are you being guided? I asked. That, mon ami, Poirot said gently, is what we must understand before another person is led to their death. The wind blew a fragment of newspaper across the pavement. I caught it underfoot. So he said in that brisk tone he uses when grimness threatens to settle too deeply. Onward, tomorrow we will call Dr. Adrian Vine. The girl saw him just before her death. Let us find out why. Poirot adjusted his hat against the breeze. Yes, he agreed. The photographer came first, followed by the agent and now the physician. There are 3 influential faces, and the woman with the telephone voice is somewhere among them or just beyond them. We turned towards the station. Behind us, London resumed its enormous, indifferent breathing, unaware or unwilling to notice the small Violet pinned to a cheap coat, now lying in the evidence room at Scotland Yard. The doctor waited ahead of us. Chapter 4, Non-Trembling Hands. The next morning was the type that makes one question why Londoners continue to live in the city at all. A damp, creeping coldness had fallen over the pavements, and the air smelt of cold soot and damp wool. I would have preferred more hour by the fire, but Poirot was already immaculate and upright, every hair neatly arranged, every intention set. Precision, Hastings, he said while adjusting his gloves. One cannot meet a man of sensitive habits who resembles a storm-tossed bird. I found this comment harsh to Sparrows, but said nothing. Inspector joined us outside the Whitehaven mansions, stamping his feet to improve circulation. Vine maintains rooms near Bayswater. Private practice, calm clientele. Knows half of West London's social ladies by name. He shot me a glare. They are familiar with him. You will see. We boarded a cab and passed through the city's gloomy winter smog. Shop girls clutching their collars against the cold, a hot milk wagon, and newsboys still chanting Violet's name. I couldn't tell whether the city mourned her or simply enjoyed the novelty of her misfortune. Dr. Adrian, Vine's metal plate sparkled against the pristine white door. Dr. Adrian Vine offers consultations by appointment. There are no superfluous flourishes or claims of specialties, only confidence. Inside, Miss Nora Hartigan, a youthful secretary, greeted us. She was composed, neat, and efficient, as if she'd seen enough of the world to stop expecting things to be different. When she saw Poirot, she did not appear rattled or reverent, but rather observant. The doctor will see you, she replied, leading us into a consultation room decorated with beautiful understatement. There were watercolors of the Lake District, a Turkish rug with slightly muted hues, and a table of medical devices organized as if their owner despised even the concept of disarray. Dr. Vine arose as we entered. He was tall, with graying hair at the temples and a dignified appearance. His motions were measured with the economy of gesture characteristic of persons used to sensitive work. Miss Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector. His voice sounded cultured, yet strangely flat. Please sit. Poirot stayed standing. You saw Mademoiselle Violet Silverlake once, he said without preface. Yes, Vine replied. 3 weeks ago. She came in with a little skin discomfort. The actress's dread will be visible under strong studio lighting. I prescribed a lotion. A straightforward matter. Poirot tilted his head. She was nervous, the landlady reports. Many young women feel apprehensive in consultation rooms. Vine responded, Unfortunately, medicine exudes a sense of judgment. People feel they can see more than they actually do. Japp's voice was brisk. You haven't seen her again? No, a pause. She called once to inquire if the lotion could be used twice a day instead of one. That's all. Poirot's gaze fell softly on Vine's hands. They were long, slim and steady. The hands of a surgeon or sculptor, which had never trembled. If I may ask, Doctor, Poirot spoke gently, do you perform surgery as well as consultations? Vine replied, A little. I received some training earlier in my work. I no longer perform surgeries. Other talents required in private practice include, Poirot suggested a calm demeanor, a comforting tone, and the capacity to keep one's thoughts to oneself. It was an intriguing answer. Maybe it's too interesting. Poirot's gaze shifted to a small object on top of a side table, a metronome. Ebony finally made its pendulum stop in the middle. You use this? Poirot inquired. Dr. Vine stated that this is to enhance concentration. Even consultations have rhythm. One must attend to it. Poirot carefully stroked the instrument. Huh? A man who believes that a steady beat may govern his body and life. Vine's expression didn't change. Miss Hartigan re-entered to deliver tea. Poirot regarded her in the same way that one might watch a pause before playing a card. You are long in the doctor's service, mademoiselle. She stated that it was nearly a year. And you find the work enjoyable. She said, It is steady. Consistent job is a blessing. Poirot took note of something unsaid and filed it away. He folded his notebook. We have no accusations to make, Doctor. But you were one of the last people we confirmed Miss Silverlake spoke with. If you remember anything unusual, she said, now is the time. Vine paused for barely more than half a breath. She inquired, and he slowly replied whether I felt that people could entirely transform themselves and become somebody new. I informed her that character is significantly more stubborn than youth realizes. So how did she react? Poirot asked. She did not appear disappointed, but more resigned, as if she had already suspected. There was something chilling about that. Poirot nodded once politely. You've been quite helpful, Doctor. As we were led out, Poirot paused at the hall table, where a black leather medical case sat neatly waiting. It had a slight white coating along the clasp, hardly more than a speck, undetectable unless one was Poirot. He didn't touch it. Instead, he softly inquired, Doctor, do you have a second address? Maybe a little workplace. Vine's expression changed just slightly. No, he replied, and it was a lie. Poirot grinned, one of his very little smiles, the type that means nothing but patience. Outside, the cold struck us cleanly after the stale air of the consulting rooms. The street was wet and reflected lamplight in broken areas. He hunched his shoulders against the wind. He asked, Is he our man? Poirot shook his head, not in denial, but with reserve. He is a man accustomed to being listened to, he told me. Ignoring such men can be deadly. But risk does not imply guilt. Not yet. And the violets? I inquired. Poirot's face became contemplative. The violets were hers, Hastings, her mother's memory and strength. The murderer did not give them to her. He only used what she already had. That is the mark of someone who did not want to modify herself, but rather to own her narrative. Exhaled sharply. So we're looking for someone who knew she wore them, knew what they meant, someone close. Yes, Poirot said quietly. Someone who has paid special attention to her symbols, habits, and hopes. Someone who thought they understood her better than she did herself. The woman on the phone, I mumbled. And we have no idea what her name is, added solemnly. Not yet, Poirot replied, but we know how she thinks. And it is the start. He buttoned his coat with precision. Next, we must determine who spoke about Violet with admiration and who with certainty. Certainty is the more hazardous of the two. I looked at him. Where do we begin? Poirot stepped into the street, his figure crisp and immovable against the fog. We begin, he said, with those who professed to be assisting her. And the three of us strolled on, the city swallowing our footsteps as a telephone eagerly waited to ring again. Chapter 5, the final evening. It was who retrieved the facts that revealed the truth about the phone calls from the veil of supposition. A policeman from the Bayswater beat had arrived at the yard with a memo indicating that Violet Silverlake had been seen shortly before her death. Not alone, but conversing with someone outside a little tea shop on Westbourne Grove. We went there immediately. The shop was called the Violet Cup, but its name, I discovered, predated Violet Silverlake by 30 years. It was a location frequented by shopaholics on payday and elderly ladies looking for weak tea and stronger chat. On that frigid afternoon, only 2 tables were occupied, and a little coal fire fought to keep the space warm. When the proprietor, a lady with an ink-stained apron, saw the studio print, she knew Violet right away. "Yes, that's her," she responded gently. She came in occasionally, ordered tea, and sat by the window, always holding her small flowers. He seemed pleasant and a good listener. People spoke to her. People, the questioner inquired. Women, the proprietor stated, are always women. The type that prefers alone, those who wish the world had turned out differently for them. Poirot leaned forward. "And the final night?" "Yes," the woman replied. "She arrived just after 6. She sat down, ordered tea, and 10 minutes later, another woman entered and sat with her." "How did she look like?" I asked. The proprietor hesitated. "I couldn't tell her age. 30 maybe. 40, not young, not old. The kind of face you'd see in the street 3 times without realizing it. Plain coat, gloves, and a hat with no ornaments. If she didn't want to be remembered, she made a good choice." Poirot nodded, and then they spoke. "They did," she explained. "It's only about 20 minutes. The other one did the majority of the talking." Violet listened. "Did Violet seem pleased?" he inquired. "No," the woman said after a time. "Not pleased. Set, as if a decision has been reached. Set?" The word rang in the warm, tiny tea room, like something cold and steely. Pooh inquired, "Did they leave together?" So the older person left first. Violet waited for a moment more before rising and leaving. She didn't glance back. We stepped out onto the street. Fog flowed between the structures like breath. Poirot was extremely still. "Hastings," he remarked calmly, described the reverse of sentimental sadness. I made up my mind. Violet had resolved something here. This is where her fate changed, asked. We sent out inquiries, see if any of the shopkeepers recognized the woman. Poirot shakes his head. "No, a woman who prefers to be nondescript does not leave traces in store displays." "Then what?" inquired. Poe pointed across the street. "Footprints, not in the snow. There's none, but in habits. Girls who come here go somewhere afterward. Where do shopgirls, clerks, and aspirants go after the day ends?" I assumed the solution was easy, routine, and unavoidable. "Home," I said. "Unless they want to change their fortunes," Poirot remarked, "they should go somewhere public. If one is naive enough to assume that fate makes appointments, one may meet it elsewhere." The Royal Regent Picture House, located just 2 streets away, was warm, light, and anonymous. We went there. The ticket booth attendant remembered Violet as well. Yes, she came that evening, came alone, bought the cheapest seat, stood a while in the lobby before the film began. She kept gazing at the doors as if expecting someone. Who asked just one inquiry. "Did another woman arrive?" The attendant frowned. "We can't be certain." A woman in a dark coat arrived late, sat several seats behind, and glanced at the back of Violet's head rather than watching the video. I felt a cold run through my body. And when the movie was over, I inquired. "They left separately," the attendant explained. Violet exited the side door and headed toward Queensway. "The other went out the front," Poirot murmured, "to avoid being perceived as connected." We stepped back outdoors. The fog increased and lights blurred into halos. Poirot's face remained composed as usual, but it now had a steely edge. Hastings asked, "What do we know now that we didn't know before Violet agreed to meet with her?" I informed her. Yes, and that she believed there was something to gain by it, and the woman followed. I replied, "Exactly," Pooh said. The woman did not take the lead. She was watching. She waited. She let Violet stroll into the darkness on her own, made a disgusted sound. So she knew exactly where Violet was headed. "Yes," Poirot replied softly, "because she chose the path." He turned towards the station. "We now have not only the caller but the meeting, and soon we shall have her name." And then I asked. Poirot's voice was calm, but it was full with certainty. Then we set the stage. Chapter 6, The Arrangement. Poirot's sitting area was as quiet as a theatre before the curtain rose. The flames remained low. The curtains were pulled. Outside, London went about its raucous business, but here the air was tight, methodical, and almost ceremonial. Darnell arrived first, scared and pallid. Mrs. Broom followed, stiff-backed and mouth-set. Dr. Adrian Vine appeared third, as composed as ever, with his gloves in one hand and a courteous expression of interest. Miss Hartigan finished last. She shut the door quietly behind her, and the inspector positioned himself near the window. He didn't speak. He did not have to. Poirot, with the civility of a master of ceremonies, waved toward the chairs. "Thank you for attending." He explained that we are here for Violet Silverlake. No one responded. Poirot placed 3 items on the table: Darnell's studio photo, a little glass dish of plaster dust, and a sprig of violets, all beautifully pressed. He didn't touch any of them. Violet Silverlake, Poirot stated, was not foolish. She was young, and youth is a thing that seeks guidance. She hoped, and as a result she was noticed. His gaze shifted to the room, not landing but floating, as if guilt were an unmistakable scent. "There are those," he added softly, "who do not seek affection or praise. They seek influence, not to love, but to shape, select, and organize." Darnell's hands trembled. Mrs. Broom sat rigidly. Dr. Vine's expression remained unchanged, while Miss Hartigan's face became completely neutral. No astonishment, no protest, just silence. Pooh didn't glance at her. "Let's start with what we know. Violet Silverlake received 3 phone calls from a woman before her death, once again." The voice was calm, unhurried, assured, a voice accustomed to offering guidance. He strode slowly and carefully, as if organizing the entire room. The calls came from 2 kiosks, one near Hyde Park Gate and one near Bayswater. The second was extremely close to Dr. Adrian Vine's consulting chambers. It was silent. Poirot turned towards Vine. "You immediately noticed VO in your rooms, but the genuine meeting was organized elsewhere. A tea room in Westbourne Grove. You did not attend. Someone attended to you, someone who prefers to be overlooked." He turned his head, not drastically, but just enough. Miss Hartigan didn't blink. Poirot continues. "At the tea room, Violet listened. She departed with determination, not fear, because what she was offered was metamorphosis. The opportunity to become a different version of herself, to break free from her hunger and uncertainty, and to be guided." He paused. "Then there was the picture house, where one woman sat behind her, not beside her, monitoring the back of her head, approving that she was following the road mapped out for her, not intervening, just guaranteeing." Miss Hartigan spoke in a steady tone. "You are creating a narrative." Poe grinned pleasantly. "No, mademoiselle, I'm revealing one." He returned to the table and touched the plate containing plaster dust. Violet's wrist plaster was not made of theatrical grease paint. Dental plaster was used for taking impressions. It leaves no grain. It hides bruises. It removes evidence of restraint. It is also employed by males who have been trained to sculpt their bodies with extraordinary effectiveness. He stared at Vine now directly. "The plaster came from your lock-up studio. The bills bear a bogus name, but the deliveries do not. They're in the yard." Vine's lips compressed, not in terror but in anger, as if at an administrative difficulty. Poole turned back to Hartigan. "You choose Violet, mademoiselle, not out of affection, but because of criteria. You chose girls with hope, not protection. Girls who would stroll alone to a tea room at dusk because they were invited to. Girls who could be persuaded that true change is possible." Miss Hartigan refused to look away. She was wasting her life. She claimed she would have ended up in bed-sits with men who lied to her or starving on the streets. "We provided something better." "Better?" Mrs. Broom murmured. Poirot raised his hand, not to silence her but to steady the atmosphere. "Miss Hartigan," he said, "you thought the world was unkind. To live, one must be remade. You chose the subjects." "And Dr. Vine," he acknowledged and made the modification. Dr. Vine spoke for the first time. "Control," he added, "is the greatest kindness. You prevent misery by removing the capacity for error." She wanted to change. She simply lacked willpower. "We provided the will. I felt colder than the fog outside." "You killed her," I said. "No," Miss Hartigan replied. "We finished her." Pooh closed his eyes only once. When he opened them again, they were diamond hard. "You staged her," he replied calmly. "You posed her. You used her own flowers because you recognized what they signified. You rewrote her story, so the world would see your interpretation rather than hers." Vine's look intensified into irritation. Sentiment clouded reality. "Stood. That is enough." Miss Hartigan glanced at him, not imploring or outraged, just analyzing if communication was still relevant. She walked to the finish. She agreed to improve. She wanted to be more than herself. Poole stepped forward. No, mademoiselle. She wanted to be seen, not rearranged. A beat of quiet. I placed a hand on Vine's shoulder. Dr. Adrian Vine, I'm arresting you for murder. Vine rose gracefully, as if ending a consultation. Miss Hartigan remained sitting for a little longer. She only stood up when her name was called. You will also come. Miss Hartigan nodded once, not dejected, simply considering the next arrangement she would no longer be able to make. They were escorted out. Mrs. Broom bent her head. Darnell wiped his tears with quivering hands. Poirot extinguished the metronome with a single touch. Violet Silverlake was buried the following week at the small beach hamlet from where she had arrived. The violets laid on her grave were simple, not planned or symbolic, just flowers. She wanted to be seen, I remarked gently. Poe responded, She is. And as herself we stood for a while longer. The sea breeze lifted our coats. Then we turned back home. London awaited along with its shadows. Epilogue from Hercule Poirot's private notes, discovered amid files after his death, undated but set in the winter-time. My friend, it is customary in Hastings to remark that all I think about is order. He makes a comedy out of it, in his English style. But he is not mistaken. Order is not the antithesis of chaos. It is the antithesis of cruelty. Chaos is simply the untended state of the planet. Cruelty is the world is ordered by the wrong hands. The case of Violet Silverlake has remained with me. She was unremarkable to the city. Every day London sees 100 of these, the young and ambitious, the hopeful with only a memory and a belief. However, she possessed something extremely fine. The capacity to hope without greed. That is a remarkable display of courage. 2 minds working together ruined her, not from passion or hatred, but from horrible tidiness. They want to improve her. The doctor and secretary work together as cleanly as 2 blades of a pair of scissors. One chooses, the other cuts. I am reminded that the worst atrocities are those done in the name of improvement. To delete another person's story in favor of one that is more apparent. That is definitely violence. When I saw the violets at the end, pressed, fragile, and easily crushed between the pages of another's arrangement, I thought, how do the English say it? A contraction of the heart. The violets were her symbol and claim, not theirs. I put them back. It isn't always possible to avoid injury. Often the harm is done before the act is committed, by gradually eroding a person's confidence in themselves. But I tell myself, and I write it down so I don't forget, there is one responsibility we owe the deceased, to restore their story to its proper form. Violet Silverlake wanted to be seen. In the end she was. That is not justice, not in the grand sense, but it is justice enough for the heart that has been broken. I close the casebook. I smooth the violet in my notepad and tell myself that even the smallest thing that is sincerely chosen is worth defending with all the little grey cells a man can muster.